Constructing a trilogy is a lot to live up to. How you build excitement, finish the story, how you keep things interesting the entire time. All of these factors need to be carefully considered when putting that daunting number 3 next to any title. The Halo series has always exemplified itself as Microsoft's flagship franchise, and they've certainly backed up its fame and success with routine quality from beginning to end of Halo's original trilogy. This really felt like the end of an era, as if no matter in what context we see Master Chief or the Halo universe next, it would be something different. This was what the last 2 games had built up to though, and Bungie had to deliver on all of those expectations. And if I may be so bold, I think they delivered and handily too. As Halo fans transitioned from the original Xbox to the new, powerful Xbox 360, Halo's developers also made the best possible use of this hardware change to create a shiny new presentation for the rest of their story. And not only does Halo 3 look good, but it feels good too. In a gameplay sense, it's quick to learn and easy to enjoy, and in a story sense, it seems like an appropriate conclusion to several years of development and multiple intersecting storylines. It obviously wasn't the end of the Halo series as we can now see, but it still feels like a solid indent that follows any good trilogy, allowing players to enjoy some closure to their experience and think back fondly on all 3 collective adventures. As if to really prove that they know how to make a game by now, Bungie made it very easy to realize everything Halo 3 has in store before you even have to give it too much of your time. The majority of what I'm going to be covering in this video can almost all be observed in the very first level of the game, allowing players to discover all sorts of new gameplay mechanics, visual upgrades, and further development of Bungie's world as they learn for themselves what's so great about Halo 3. In Halo 3, Master Chief, Sergeant Johnson, and some other notable cast and crew from the Halo series return to Earth to protect humanity's home planet from an attack by the Covenant after the events of Halo 2 and the Prophet of Truth's rise to power. Master Chief crashes back to Earth in the opening cutscene and is soon reunited with Sergeant Johnson and a squad of usual UNSC Marines, but this time they're also joined by the ex-Covenant zealot known as the Arbiter. This former anti-hero from Halo 2 is now aiding the UNSC search for the heads of the Covenant forces in order to protect the universe from a horrible fate. Having an elite on your team takes some time to get used to for any player, just as it would for Master Chief, but luckily, for any player new to the concept or having trouble differentiating alien species, the first few levels include no elites on the enemy forces, favoring focus on the grunts and brutes who have curried favor with the Prophet of Truth during the events of Halo 2. The Arbiter is also a great opportunity for a second player position that makes sense when playing cooperatively, rather than either a duplicate Master Chief or a nameless UNSC soldier. Not to mention, he frequently serves as a waypoint whenever you need some help finding your next objective. As I mentioned, you'll spend the majority of this game face to face with far more brute and grunt enemies, and that means these foes had to be made more interesting. New enemy types also means new weapons, equipment, and all sorts of differences in combat. Grunts may rush in as plasma grenade suicide bombers, and brutes contrast significantly with elites due to the presence of physical armor over energy shields, and a vast array of new tools for conflict. For instance, you may now see some of your enemies throwing down their own health items or even one of the new bubble shields. These new protective orbs cover a soldier from fire from all directions, but if you can manage to get in and take out the enemy in close combat, you can set up shop and use the shield for yourself for a while. Many pieces of equipment, from bubble shields to grav lifts, can also be picked off of enemies you've previously defeated, just as weapons can be. Brutes also flaunt a few new decently powerful weapons, known as the Spiker, a pretty reliable submachine gun, and the Gravity Hammer, an aggressively powerful melee weapon wielded only by high-ranking brute officers. Many of the game's weapons also have some cool visual updates, such as the displays on many of the Covenant guns themselves, now portrayed with more holographic displays, floating off of the gun with the impressive power of alien technology. The first proper level of Halo 3, titled Sierra 117 after the Master Chief's call sign, feels like a really enjoyable version of a tech demonstration, which guides players into situations where they can learn and experience whatever features this new game on new hardware has to offer. The squad of Marines that you're a part of in the first level helps you find your way around the natural environment of trees and stones that offer very few landmarks to new players. The moment of crossing through tighter than usual crevasses while being subjected to long-range fire by jackals is a very new experience in the Halo series, as many enemies with long-range weapons were often, oddly enough, further away but in a direct line of sight, so you regularly had your assailant in immediate view as long as you were looking in the suspected area of your enemies. The first time you take on a large number of opponents, you'll approach them from a nice high vantage point, and even have a cutscene to point out the fact that you're approaching them unannounced. This gives the player a moment to practice long-distance shots and battle preparations from relative safety. The battlefields in Halo 3 feel so much more dynamic than any of this entry's predecessors, as if the player can now be involved in any aspect of the current conflict. The greatest representation of this that I can think of is when the new monstrous enemy vehicle known as the Scarab lands amidst your team. You're actually able to board it if you can find a high enough position to jump onto its decks. From there, you can fight the opponents in close quarters on this actively moving base, taking it out from the inside and jumping to safety as it blows up. If I'm not mistaken, you were able to board a Scarab in Halo 2, though it just acted like more of an on-rails platform rather than a colossal vehicle packed with enemies. The vastly improved lighting engine can easily be recognized from the game's first few levels as well. Some of the science fiction-based objects such as energy shields and weapons have a much brighter and more colorful glow to them, embracing their alien origins. The explosive fusion coils also glow with the new lighting engine. Once you understand their purpose as environmental explosives, they fit Halo's universe much better than the traditional video game trope of red barrels. They're noticeable as tools in combat, but easy to keep in mind so that you don't find yourself standing too close during a firefight. This shouldn't be a surprise given our discussion of enhanced lighting, but explosions and the impact of energy-based weapons among many other particle effects also look so much more impressive in this entry. A very notable shift in environment for any returning Halo players would have to be the setting of the first level. Halo 3 is the first game in the series that hasn't started on a military ship in space, instead beginning where the UNSC finds Chief's crash site. I feel like the lush and colorful environment was just meant to show off the power of the new graphical hardware in play on the Xbox 360, rather than the simpler, cold metal hallways of the ships in the first two games. It's really impressive how much of a graphical jump this was once you actually get up close to both the enemies and the environmental dressings of the first level. The Covenant Dropship is so advanced in terms of graphical and technological capabilities that it finally has discernible gunners on the external plasma cannons which can actually be fired upon. In a similar vein, you can also see each individual thruster of a Pelican as it fine-tunes its landing. It wouldn't be a great advancement to the visuals of the game if Bungie didn't also update something that virtually every player has to stare at for the entirety of their experience, and that would be the heads-up display in the player's helmet. All of the displays in the visor and the information portrayed along with it feel much more like a part of what Master Chief would be seeing, rather than just boxes in the corners of your TV that tell you things you need to know about the game. The number and graphics regarding your weapons and ammunition, and of course any information about your shields and directional damage, are all displayed in a style befitting a Spartan helmet. The binoculars, or scoped vision with weapons such as the Magnum, fills the screen so much more when zoomed in and provides a much better view to the player. The player will also be guided with more occasional waypoints and objective messages that will remain displayed on their visor. The audio in Halo 3 also takes advantage of some of the Xbox 360's new hardware, as it is so much better mixed than the previous entries. For example, your allies' voices no longer jump out at you.
Cover me! Over here! Go! 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 I see him!
Which is not just a sin of earlier Microsoft technology, but video games as a whole, wherein the dialogue needed specific focus in the limited audio tracks that were available, and often took priority over music or sound effects. But now, you can really hear the other characters around you, either good or bad, in respect to the distance and volume of other noises in your vicinity. This improvement in quality also offered more ground for entertainment in the audio front as well. There's a lot more goofy commentary from your allies in response to happenings around them. If you fall in battle, members of your squad will call out referencing your demise like in Metal Gear Solid or Killzone. Even the enemy grunts have some fun and interesting dialogue referencing their cowardice or spirit of revenge when involved in combat and witnessing the destruction of their comrades or commander. If I'm not mistaken, Halo 3 was the introduction of the skulls, and of course, Xbox achievements in the series as well. The combinations of these optional objectives and collectibles added a substantial amount of replayability, especially for those who wanted to pursue the greatest challenge that the Halo series has to offer, the Lasso Run. This being a campaign on the highest difficulty with the activation of every game-modifying skull. These skulls change the game, ranging from simpler ways, such as confetti when killing grunts, to more complicated and severely difficult modifiers like no heads-up display or forcing the player to restart the level upon death. The ability to run this gauntlet allows for many ridiculous scenarios in both single-player or competitive campaign runs, extensively padding Halo 3's playability and longevity in the gaming market. The first Halo game did a great job of establishing your position as the Master Chief and what it means to be this powerful Spartan super soldier, but Halo 2 and 3 did a great job of stacking threats and obstacles to keep you from feeling like a god among men. There are so many feats of strength, endurance, and timing throughout Halo 3 that will challenge players to make the most of horrible situations as they deal with the weapons or allies they have access to against so many different combinations of enemies. This is one of the few series in which I don't mind the idea of replaying the campaigns soon after completing them the first time through, mostly because these are quick, easily digestible campaigns that pride themselves on fun, interactive combat rather than mind-blowing story points. The story is good, but it doesn't sell itself as one of those big twists and turns sort of games, wherein once you know the ending it just isn't as interesting the second time. However, after playing each campaign, I was very much interested in replaying them on higher difficulties or with friends to experience the gameplay in different ways rather than the story. Halo 3 is a great ending to the original Master Chief saga. Obviously, we've had several more games released in the series at this point, but Halo 3 really feels like a successful conclusion to the original trilogy. The last few missions of the game demonstrate the culmination of gameplay mechanics, characters, and conflicts that we've come to know through our adventures with Master Chief. Several locations, fights, and lines of dialogue feel strongly and intentionally reminiscent of our journey amidst the UNSC, Covenant, and Flood, as many of the second game's calculated loose ends are brought to a close, and we're left with a great statement on where the series of Halo lies with the closing of this game's story, as it's been developing to its greatest potential across 3 exciting titles. In the end, we're left with a fantastic gaming experience that leaves the player wanting more in spirit and enjoyment, but not in necessity or expectation. That is what's so great about Halo 3. Thank you all for joining us on this episode of What's So Great About Gaming, as we wrapped up Master Chief's original trilogy with Halo 3. Make sure to tell us what you think about Halo 3, or even suggest a game for another video. If you want to help in supporting the channel, or maybe check out some bonus content, consider checking out our Discord, Twitch, or Patreon. Links for all of those are in the description. If you want to hear what's great about another game, check out the link to our last episode, Silent Hill, on screen or in the description. And please take the time to subscribe to be involved in the discussions here. Thanks again for watching. Now go play a great game. We'll see you next time.